Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sandy Kane, and I'm the CEO of Real Sourcing Network, your sponsor for this webinar. And I just want to welcome all of you, especially under these so incredibly trying times. And I certainly hope that everybody is both well and safe, and you should all stay that way. We're really glad to have you with us today, especially under these trying times. The topic of our discussion today is supplier diversity. And I'm really excited about the program we put together. In a couple of minutes, we'll be hearing first from an expert who's been working in the supplier diversity space for more than 14 years. And then after that, we have a panel of executives who are very familiar with various supplier diversity programs. And they'll all be sharing their experiences about how to make supplier diversity programs work. Before we get started, I just want to cover a couple of things. First, a very brief introduction to a Real Sourcing Network, or RSN. We provide an e-sourcing software solution for printed materials and a wide range of marketing services, including graphic design, copywriting, web design, video production, mailing services, etc. Several of our clients have active supplier diversity programs in place, and our software enables companies to identify which of their vendors qualify as diverse suppliers and then track their spending with each type of diverse supplier. So this topic is a very important one to us. Second, I just want to remind you that we'd love to get questions from you during the seminar. You can submit your questions by typing them in on the right side of your screen where it says questions, and we'll have time both before the end of the presentation to answer all of them. And then finally, we're recording this webinar, and we'll be sending you a link to the recording within the next few days, so you don't need to take copious notes. You can just listen and enjoy the agenda. Speaking of that, not spending a lot of time on it, but that's me. Our agenda, okay? We're going to be covering, all of this. Why is it important to partner with diverse suppliers? How to find them? How to ensure success of a good diversity program, how to measure the performance of those programs, what are the biggest challenges associated with these programs, and how these programs will change over the next few years, along with the fact that they've already changed a lot in the past. Having said that, let's get started. First thing I want to do is to introduce our presenter, Lamont Robinson, and I just want to briefly introduce Lamont by saying he's the founder and CEO of Robinson LaRue Consulting, a firm that specializes in working with companies to develop and implement world-class supplier diversity programs. He's been a nationally recognized leader in this field for more than 14 years. He's received numerous awards, including the 2010, excuse me, that's my phone, which I will shut off. Amazingly enough, it was a crank call. He's 845-634-2817. We'd be glad to call you back if you leave a message after the beep. Not sure how to shut her off. Oh, there it goes. Anyway, sorry about that, about my introduction with Lamont. He's received numerous awards, including the 2010 Corus Boyd Leadership and Diversity Award from the Federation of American Hospitals. This award recognized an individual or company that has made an outstanding contribution to fostering leadership and workplace diversity in the healthcare industry. Great award. Lamont, I want to just thank you on behalf of all of us for being part of our webinar today, and I'm looking forward to your insights. So I'm now going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Sandy. I appreciate that. I think I need to live up to that level of expectation that you put on the rest of the listeners here. But I'm excited. Supplier diversity is something that's always been near and dear to me for a while, even before I found out what it was. And really, it was because where I came from. I came from the west side of Chicago, where I did not see a lot of diversity within the business ownership. And so when I found out about this thing called supplier diversity, I got excited. And so what is it? So supplier diversity is a program that was set up to buy products and services from companies owned by, as you see in the triangle, women, minorities, veterans, LGBT, service disabled. So all of the ones that you see there really makes up supplier diversity. And to qualify, you have to be at least 51% owner, but then also more importantly, operator and controller of those entities. And the reason why that's important is if you are a woman-owned company and you own 100% of the company, but your husband is operating and controlling that company on a daily basis, you would not get certified as a woman-owned company because technically you're not really in control of that company. You may own it outright, but you're not controlling that company. So to understand a little bit more in terms of how we evolved into what this thing supplier diversity is, I want to go to the next slide. And so the next slide goes into the history of supplier diversity. And so when we think about supplier diversity, a lot of us think that it's a program, that was probably set up over the last 20, 30 years. But really the origin of supplier diversity goes all the way back to the before that in the Great Depression era, where Congress stepped up to provide loans to both large and small businesses. But then during the war efforts, you started seeing more of a focus on the ability to assist the small businesses so that they could provide the products and services that the larger counterparts could. And so as a result of that, Congress stepped up and established the Small Business Administration in 1953 so that it could provide the assistance financially to those small businesses. And then the making of supplier diversity as we see it today really started during the affirmative action era in the mid 60s. And so in 1969, President Nixon signed an executive order so that he mandated businesses in the government to do business with, at that time, minority-owned businesses. And so from that spawned an organization called the National Minority Supplier Development Council, which started in 1972. And then supplier diversity just took off. And so all of a sudden it became you had organizations like the Women's Business National Conference or Council. You had the National Veteran-Owned Business Association. So basically these organizations were developed to be able to advocate for their respective diversity classifications. So you had a situation where in the 60s and 70s where it was mandated, again, by this executive order. And then all of a sudden in the 80s and 90s, it became a corporate responsibility. So it's the right thing to do is what you used to hear all the time. And so now the reason why I love it so much is because it's now an economic imperative. And so when we build supplier diversity programs, that's what we focus on in terms of how do we make this an economic imperative so that, number one, you're helping these diverse businesses, but they also, another part of it is you're helping the community that you're surrounded by. And so using supplier diversity. So I'll go a little bit deeper into that. And if we go to the next slide, which goes into the business case for supplier diversity. So we talked about some of these already, but the 6 C's is something that we created to really explain why is it important. And it doesn't matter what industry you're in, so it's industry agnostic. It doesn't matter the size of your company, but every company really fits within one of these C's in terms of why they should have a supplier diversity program or why they should build on top of their program. So the first C at the top that you see is clients. And so typically you have clients that are needing diversity. You may have some clients that, if it's a B2B business, that's actually influencing their suppliers to build supplier diversity programs. If it's a B2C business, you have communities that are very ethnic, or maybe they're near a naval base, or one of those, they match one of those diversity classifications. And so we see a lot of programs being built because of a client request. We had a previous client that had one of their clients was Marriott, and Marriott was influencing them to build a program. So they came to us to help them build a program. So a lot of it, again, stems from the client, whether it's in the public or private sector space. Competition is another C, and we see that a lot as well. So if you have an industry where the majority of those companies have supplier diversity programs and you don't, what you're starting to see nowadays, especially those of you that are in procurement, which I believe is all of us on the call, the RFPs, the request for proposals that are coming in, they have language supporting diversity. So they're asking, do you have a program in place? What are you doing to support diversity? And so by building a program, it allows you to be able to meet those specific needs and to really create, in some instances, a differentiator if your program is better than your competitors. And also from a competitive situation is in your supply chain, the more you do business with diverse suppliers, you're introducing them to your supply chain. So that means that you have now more competition within that supply chain because you have more viable sources to choose from. And so that drives the cost down by increasing the amount of competitors and viable options that you have. Compliance is another element of why we build supplier diversity programs. So if you have a government contract, you're actually mandated to build a program. If you're a hospital system and you receive a federal grant, again, there's a mandate within that. Even Sarbanes-Oxley has a mandate in terms of supporting diverse businesses. And even outside of government, again, in that instance with the client that had Marriott as a client, Marriott had embedded that in their contracts. And so there was a compliance element as far as why they needed to build the program. Community at the bottom, again, I started out by talking about my experience growing up in Chicago. So community is another piece of this as well. So when the diverse suppliers are the ones that are employing individuals from urban areas a lot of times, or areas or individuals that may not be able to get employment at the large corporations that are out there. So the more you're supporting, especially those local diverse businesses, the more jobs that they're adding to that particular community. And we already know, or we can get a feel for how that dollar is circulated within that community. And especially nowadays with the global pandemic that's happening, we've already seen the negative impact of not being able to recirculate that dollar. And so again, supporting your local diverse businesses allows you to be able to help the economic vitality of that particular community. Customization, diverse suppliers have the capabilities of customizing solutions. Typically, when you're talking to somebody from a diverse business, you're talking to the owner or somebody that's not too far removed from being the owner. So if you ask them to customize a solution for you, they can do it much faster than their larger counterparts. The larger counterparts have more bureaucracy set up so that it's not that they couldn't meet the needs, it's just that they have to go through so many different approval processes in order to be able to meet that particular needs. And so what we're also seeing is the customization in terms of technology and how technology is allowing more small, diverse businesses to sell products and services globally. So again, going back to the pandemic that we have here, I've been having a lot of conversations with small manufacturers here in the US that could sell to hospital, and then also connecting them to small sourcers that have connections overseas in China to buy product. And so making that connection, all of those are diverse entities. And so that's the beautiful part about technology. It's not that we have to get on an airplane and travel and be in front of large groups. Technology makes it so that we could sell our services to anyone in the world. And then lastly is cost. And so I mentioned cost from a perspective of adding more diverse businesses. But in this perspective, I want to talk about cost in terms of, there's a stigma that's associated with small businesses. And that stigma is that you have to pay more. I've got to pay more in order to do business with diverse suppliers. That's not true. Diverse suppliers don't have 1,000 sales reps out there pounding the pavement. So they have more flexibility when it comes to controlling their costs. Now, true, they may not have the leverage necessarily if they negotiate on their own in terms of their pricing, which is reflected in a higher price to their ultimate clients. However, there are buying groups now that these diverse businesses could join that would allow them to be able to control their costs. And then one of the things that we like to do is encourage the corporations to also provide webinars and various education to the diverse businesses on how they can control their cost also, because it could be a situation where they're just not familiar with different ways of how to control their costs. And so again, having a supplier diversity program could lead to price decreases, and really you're not helping the diverse supplier if you're not educating them about how they could improve their pricing. Because nobody should be paying more if you're doing business with a diverse company. The next slide goes into really the pillars of a successful supplier diversity program. And so what we call with this is RISE. So RISE with supplier diversity. And so what we mean by that is, typically when you hear about, what makes a supplier diversity successful, for the most part, you hear a lot about spend. We want to get the highest amount of spend with diverse suppliers. But I've seen very successful supplier diversity programs that may not have as much spend because of the specific industries that they represent. And I've also seen situations where you have a program that has, let's say close to 40–50% spend with diverse businesses, but they're not really a successful, they don't have a successful supplier diversity program. They may have the majority of that spend tied into maybe 1 or 2 diverse businesses. That doesn't help the others. And so what we did was come up with a, what are the main buckets of success? And the first one is revenue generation. If you can find a way to generate revenues through supplier diversity, it's the best way to be able to build a program while getting the C-suite support. And what we mean by that is either find a way to partner with a diverse firm to sell to the general marketplace, or find a way to sell your products and services that you already provide today to sell that to the diversity community. And so when you do that, you tie in revenue generation to your supplier diversity program. Another way is looking at the infrastructure. And what we mean by that is, what's the DNA of your organization? Supplier diversity is a lot about, or revolves around, change agency. So being able to get out there and change, or change management. So changing the mentality of the employees in terms of being able to embrace a supplier diversity program. And so understanding that and working with your diversity and inclusion team and helping them to be able to, in a sense, educate your employee base on what supplier diversity is, or just diversity as a whole. Because I always say you can't have a successful supplier diversity program without having a successful overall diversity and inclusion program first. And so that's what that is about. And just, you may have affinity groups, or what they call employee resource groups, and using them to help with your supplier diversity efforts as well. Spend is the S in RISE. And again, it's the main metric that everybody talks about. And our thought is a successful supplier diversity program is not necessarily driven solely by spend, but spend or an increase in spend is a byproduct of a successful supplier diversity program. So if you have everything else in place, spend will naturally increase because you have more people internally that will know what supplier diversity is, and you have more support to support diverse businesses. And then lastly, E, education. Education is key, and that's education internally with your employees. It's education within the community by using your business subject matter experts to educate them about specific elements, whether it's, marketing 101 or finance. You can educate your local diverse businesses that way. It's also educating your large suppliers as well. So getting them on board with supporting your supplier diversity program through what they call the Tier 2 program. So again, we've got a fantastic panel ahead of you, and hopefully the information that I provided was good enough to be able to get a better feel for what supplier diversity is, what's the business case for it, the history behind it, and then also how can we improve our programs. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Sandy.
Thanks so much, Lamont. That was really informative, and it kind of really sets the stage for the discussion that we're going to have. What I'd like to do is to introduce our all-star panel briefly, and have them give you, a quick shot at their background. Let me first start with Peter. He's a director of sourcing at Verizon. Peter, thanks so much for being a part of this today. If you just give him, a minute on your background, that would be great.
Sure, Sandy, thanks. Excited to be with everyone today and appreciate the time to talk about this really interesting and exciting topic on diversity and the supply base and diversity in general. In addition to my current role at Verizon, and I will say I'm not going to speak specifically about operations at Verizon directly, but I have been the global head of procurement and supply chain at WeWork, global head of procurement for retail development at Tesla Motors. I also spent some time at the University of California, where I ran the e-commerce department for the entire UC system, and was also at Target for a good portion of my career in merchandising. So I have a pretty broad basis across a number of different sizes and structures of organizations in which they engage in various suppliers across the entire world, developing supply bases and suppliers and supplier diversity programs.
Thanks, Peter. Next, we've got Carla Dodds. She is the Marketing Development and Operations Principal Consultant at Nova Mercatus. Thanks for being with us, Carla. If you'd take a minute and tell the folks your background.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sandy and RSN, for putting this opportunity together to talk about supplier diversity, and Lamont for an excellent introduction into the subject. I have over 15 years of specialization in marketing vendor management and vendor management as a whole within the industries of energy and retail. I had the opportunity to create the first ever marketing vendor management department for Walmart US, which served as a framework for Walmart global operations as well. Today, as Sandy mentioned, I am an independent consultant with Nova Mercados focused on helping companies transform their businesses one department at a time, which includes the integration of supplier diversity to address all operational needs for the companies.
Thanks, Carla. Next, David Caracas is the Director of Sourcing and Procurement at Bluebird. David, a little bit about your background.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for having me serve on this panel with some awesome folks. As it was said, I'm the Global Head of Procurement and Sourcing at Bluebird Bio. We're a gene therapy company focused on rare disease. My background has been extensively in the biotech and healthcare space, where as a sourcing professional, have had to work in developing diverse supplier programs and recognition how they can contribute to delivering exceptional value to both the business, the buyer, as well as the seller.
Thanks, David. Next, we've got Jamie Crump, who's the president of the Richwell Group. Jamie, a little bit on your background.
Thanks, Sandy. Thank you, everyone, and happy to be here today. The Richwell Group is a consultancy for supply chain and supplier diversity. My background is 25 plus years in supply chain and strategic sourcing. Along with that came supplier diversity, working with them. And then in my last corporate role was with United Rentals, where I was responsible for strategic sourcing and supplier diversity and built out those programs for them.
Thanks, Jamie. And last and certainly not least, Tomas Weimer. He's the Digital Transformation and Process Excellence Lead at Juniper Networks. Thomas, a bit on your background.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everybody. So yes, so my experience is pretty much in manufacturing industries and mostly in chemical industries, telecom and telecommunication. And now in technologies. Supplier diversity has always been part of it. And for me, originally coming from Europe and then came here to the US, I thought it's a very interesting program to create a new dynamic. And over the last years, I have moved from traditional procurement leadership roles into more transformational digitalization roles. And supplier diversity is certainly part of it. Technology has given just a much better, stronger dynamic now. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Thomas. So let's get into it. I've got a few charts to describe a series of questions that we're going to talk about. If any of you who are listening in have any questions to go with it, please don't hesitate to add them. First, the first set of questions. Let's start with, how long has your company had a diversity program, and how long have you personally been involved with this? Peter, you want to hit that one?
Sure, I'll speak more broadly about involvement in diversity programs in general across my entire career. Actually, everywhere I've been from the start of my career, diversity programs, especially out in California in the public sector, as was mentioned by Lamont, were dictated and mandated. So the University of California, being one of the largest federally funded institutions in the entire world, has supplier diversity inherent within the program. And I would say across the entire university system, what's interesting when you get into supplier diversity, because there are 10 campuses, 5 medical centers, 3 national laboratories in the UC system. Each one of these entities approaches supplier diversity a little bit differently. And what I mean by that, there is a big focus, as Lamont said, on community and building out diverse suppliers within those communities. And that becomes really core to the ethos of each one of those campuses. So if you think about a UCLA versus a UC Santa Cruz, the affinity for suppliers that are actually local and within the UC system and within that community is really critical. So I would say across my career, It has been the entire time. Obviously, at Verizon, supplier diversity is something that is very large. And in fact, during this pandemic that we're working on, Verizon has been leaning in and expanding its supply base, much like was mentioned at the top of the program, looking at additional suppliers to provide some of the core necessities that allow us to keep the network open and operating to support services like this virtual webinar.
That's great. You know, as I look at the next three questions on here, they kind of lump together. You know, what led the company to get started with this? How important is it to your company, and what benefits do you see? David, you want to take a shot at that?
Sure. So let me just, you know, we're new, so I want to frame that from a context. We're just going on this journey, and what prompted it, and I think it was touched upon earlier, is we internally value diversity as a core belief. And so where it stemmed from, where we thought we could bring benefit also to the organization, is taking that inward focus and also looking, you know, for outside support in terms of taking it beyond our four walls. One of the indications that we're targeting has a profound impact in the African American community, sickle cell disease. And so we want to, you know, not only walk the walk, but talk the talk, and do outreach into those communities adversely affected by debilitating diseases. And whatever we can do from also a community impact by investing in companies that are within those communities is a key driver for us.
Okay. Jamie, would you like to add something to that?
Sure. I mean, the initial driver for me was when I was working for a bank in Detroit, and so General Motors was the main driver because they were a large customer. I think that's what drives a lot of it today. Are the customers are requiring it more, and also because it's really in demand in terms of if you're going to have recruit and retain the best talent at your own company. If you're going to be able to respond to those RFPs that Lamont spoke about, then you need to have that diversity in there and ingrained into the company DNA.
Okay. Carla, would you like to add to that?
Sure. So, you know, as David was saying, I think definitely for Walmart, it starts as a core fundamental value of the company of trying to provide full access to everyone. And in that is the component of equality, which also leads to diversity. So supplier diversity is really at the core of everything that's done from an operational standpoint in the organization as it supports its core values. And in the creation of marketing vendor management, supplier diversity was at the heart in ensuring also that we had the necessary amount of suppliers, but also the diversity in the sense of not just diversity of suppliers from the traditional sense, but also diversity of thought and diversity of creation. So looking at that and making sure that it's not just about quotas, but really instilling it into the everyday culture.
Great. Lamont, given your experience, you know, working consulting in this area, do you have some perspective on your clients and what else you know in the area on this subject?
You know, I think you know, the challenge of it is that sometimes folks go in with a cookie cutter approach, and you can't. You know, so you know, you've got to understand that there are tools out there that are used to be able to support what you're looking for in terms of diversity. And so, you know, you've got specific tools from like CVM or Connexus, Supplier Gateway, D&B. And really what we do is we try to figure out are you using any of those tools today? What's driving it? Just like I stated with the 6 C's, but then also what's your, you know, in terms of, as you have here, what's your strategy? So what are you looking for? You know, what is the company's DNA as far as, is it around the employees? Is it around the community? Is it around, you know, maybe the CEO came from, which is what we've seen before, the CEO came from a family that had his father was a small business owner, and so it was just near and dear to him. So it's going to vary, but the main thing is just looking at it as it's never a cookie cutter approach, and that's why I love hearing from the panelists. In terms of it's different for each one of them in terms of why they have a program.
Okay. One question I have that is kind of a piece of this, but it's not on the chart. It's reasonably common for people to think that, companies are doing, focused on diversity spend because they have to, et cetera. And that may have been true, if I think back to Lamont's history chart, 40, 50 years ago. Any of you chime in with, to what extent are these programs still driven by various kinds of legal mandates? Anybody?
I'm happy to chime in. For me, for what it's worth, I think the mandate is, there's lots of laws. I speed, right? So I'm mandated to go 40 miles an hour in a 40-mile-an-hour zone. I go 42, 43. I actually go faster, but this is being recorded.
You realize you said that publicly.
I know that, right? So to me, the mandate is just a mandate, right? And that's just my core belief. I've heard the city of Detroit. My father built a chemical business in the city of Detroit, in parts of Chicago, and the benefit of doing that. I've seen what happens to communities firsthand when people get high-paying jobs in areas that sadly are often forgotten, right? And so, there's a rule, but it goes above and beyond that, at least for me, from a why we do this.
Great.
I agree with that. This is Carla, and I have to say that even beyond Walmart, my current client, which is the Etho, and it's a smaller marketplace that offers ethical products around the world, it's really goes back to the culture and having that framework and then creating the governance or the mandate around it. But it starts deeper than just the mandate. The mandate's just to kind of keep you on the guardrails or making sure that there's some type of equal balance in the organization, whether it's a large organization like Walmart or a smaller organization like the Etho. I found this to be true. I don't know if the other panelists would agree.
Yeah, this is Peter. I would absolutely agree, especially my time at WeWork, and we can talk a lot about WeWork, the rise and fall of WeWork. But one of the interesting things there was the culture and nature of the entire business was really built around community. And we had an intense focus. While we had no mandates, we had no requirements to do it, we had an intense focus, very purposeful focus on a diverse supply base, from creators, from artists, from small suppliers that we grew, and the traditional supply base. It was a very intense culture that was really focused on that, and not because there was a mandate or a requirement to do it, but because there was community and purpose behind it, and that was the intent of the organization. So I've definitely seen that. We did track, we did measure to make sure that we understood how we were interacting with our supply base, but there certainly wasn't a mandate. And I would say, in my experience, the most successful organizations who execute on this really do it, whether it's, as Carla said or Lamont said, really do it because of a sense of purpose, and that's their core DNA or the ethos of who they are as an organization.
That's great.
Right. I guess I will go a little bit the other way. I think some industries are still very traditional. And when you go into manufacturing, chemical industries or telecom, they're pretty much very much driven first by legal mandate. And especially if you go in business where the margins are very low, programs get quickly overseen. So it then depends really on the leadership. I think when people share about the values, it's an extremely important point. But very often it gets always forgotten when it's hard to make the numbers. And when you go into technology companies, I think purely technology companies, they're a little bit behind schedule. They're trying to do the right thing, but they're not there completely there yet either. So I think it depends on the industries
Okay.
and leadership style.
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about some of the mechanics of a program. And as you see the questions here, how do you go about identifying diverse suppliers that you want to use? How do you expand your use? And do you have some kind of supplier development programs in place? Lamont, you want to hit that one?
Yeah, so I talked earlier about the different tools and tools. Again, to build strategy, you've got to have tools in place. That creates the foundation. And so I mentioned CVM, Connexus, Supplier Gateway, even D&B, Dun & Bradstreet. They have various tools. I've seen also companies build their own to be able to identify by having their own registration portal. Diverse suppliers go in, they register. And all of a sudden now, it becomes a way for their internal procurement team to be able to identify who's diverse so that they can go after them in terms of including them on specific opportunities for requests for proposals. So that's the one main thing. And then you also have diversity advocates out there. I mentioned some of them, like the National Minority Supplier Development Council, Women's Business Enterprise National Council. Those are the main two. And then you have also for veterans and LGBT with the NGLCC. So those are the advocates are, they're great groups to go to try to find, especially local diverse businesses, because they have regional affiliates. And so it's a good way to be able to, again, get their support, find out the educational opportunities that they provide, and again, be able to help them to source for diverse businesses.
Great. Jamie, you want to chime in on your thoughts on these questions?
Sure, Sandy, thanks. I think that Lamont raised a lot of good examples of the organizations. I think the other thing you can do is really understand where your spend is happening within your own organization. There are often spend that's happening that is not coming through strategic sourcing or supply chain. And so with those, you need to go find those internal clients and get them on board. I think the other thing is that I have found I have the best results when I am sourcing for everything the company's buying all the time. There's a tendency to sometimes, well, here's what we're going out to bid on in the next 12 months. Well, if you're doing it soon, that's a poor time to be meeting a lot of new companies. I would prefer to understand what my company's buying and be on the lookout for those suppliers all the time and develop those relationships. And then when the time comes, sometimes it's planned, sometimes it's not, then you can make the introduction and bring them in on board.
Sounds good. Tomas, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think technology is playing more and more a very interesting point, right? Because we are seeing more and more supplier databases or startup companies or even platforms who give access to the information. So it's not perfect yet, but I also would like to mention that I have participated in several councils, and councils play an extremely important role. And there is a very great network happening there, which can be a very good source of information also.
Great. Of course, I can't help when you make that comment to throw in a plug about RSN, because our business model specifically provides the ability for our clients to access diverse spend suppliers and keeps track of them. So, and I know we're not the only ones who do that. Ours is related to print and marketing services, but there are other procurement tools that you can use that do the same kind of thing that helps make the process work.
That's really the way
I have
to go.
a question that's not on this chart, but I thought it would be good to mention it. As you look at the various industries out there as suppliers, are there ones that typically do better than others providing diversity spend? Anybody?
My sense is that if you deal with spend type that is very local business, it's probably the one that has the best chance to succeed.
I got it. Okay.
Professional services also versus manufacturing, because there's the higher cost of entry for manufacturing versus if you're a staffing company. I can set up a staffing company right now and all of a sudden, start selling globally. So, you know, that's why you have so many and premium promotional products and things like that.
Right. Sounds good. All right, next chart. Okay. If you look at this, you know, we're talking here about what's the best way to measure performance of the program, not so much the suppliers, but the program itself. And what's the most important factors in ensuring the success of a program? What are the biggest challenges? And what do you see as changes over the next few years in that area? Okay. Um, David, some thoughts?
Yeah, and I mean, as I mentioned, we're just kicking this off, so we haven't clearly defined what's the best way to measure performance. I think for us, you know, we'll use traditional metrics just because of our maturity or the lack thereof. So something as percent of spend that is with diverse suppliers within key, you know, as the one of the previous slides had the triangles within maybe specific areas, and
Yeah.
then set targets based on what we would like to see on a go forward basis.
Okay. Jamie, some thoughts, please?
Yeah, I really like tying the measurement to company revenue and to the other company business strategies. This really is a business strategy. It's not a program anymore. The research is out there. It shows you that if you're going to have, if you're going to be the differentiator in your space, you need to have this. So in addition to the traditional measurements of things like spend, I have done things like, for example, if you're doing tier 2 reporting for some of your big clients, I was doing reporting on here's the percentage of the company revenue that's demanding tier 2 reporting. Here's the number of RFPs that come in that are asking questions about this that we're helping create sales collateral on. Those types of things tend to make it much more understandable, I think, for the C-suite in terms of where the benefits are and where it really does affect the bottom line.
Okay. Carla, could you make some comments about the third point on there in terms of the challenges that you see with this kind of program?
Yeah, I think for the most part, it's establishing that delicate balance between diversity of suppliers and equal quality of products and services. And what I mean by that is on 3 specific points is, first of all, the quality levels are not necessarily measured the same, even if it is the same service in these diverse suppliers. So trying to create that balance of the service that is required, the quality of that service required, and knowing of those diverse suppliers, how they measure it is a little challenging. The second point is, depending on the service or product that you're looking for, the volumes of diverse suppliers out there may be not equal. So that's a little bit challenging at times. And thirdly is, within the diverse suppliers, the transparency of the raw materials that they're utilizing, how they're taking supplier diversity, and that becomes very important. Specifically for the ETHO, we look not just at the products that we purchase, but also how are they applying supplier diversity.
Okay. Anybody have anything else they'd like to add on this chart? Okay. Last chart. This focuses very specifically on an area, of course, that's near and dear to RSN's heart, which is, you know, to the extent that you have experience in diversity programs in print and marketing services, I'd appreciate any kind of comments. Jamie, from your experience?
Sure. I think that there are aspects of marketing that are service and professional services oriented. So there are plenty of companies out there that are diverse in nature that you can look to do business with. I think it's very active too, because technology is becoming such a big lever in marketing with social media and all of the things that are being done online. I think you're going to see more of that now after this pandemic, because so many people have worked from home and it's been successful. So I think you're going to see more online marketing perhaps than you've seen before. And I think all of that goes well towards bringing in more diverse businesses, because it lowers that entry barrier.
Yeah.
It's not as capital intensive as it was before. And so that allows more people to go out there and, and get more, probably more niche involved. I always shudder when I ask people what kind of marketing do you do? And they say, we do everything. So I think you're going to be able to get more niche players that can really specialize in the areas that your business needs. And with that, I think you're going to see a proliferation of diverse-owned businesses.
Okay. Anybody have anything else they'd want to add on this chart? And in fact, since it's our last chart, if you've got any other thoughts you'd like to add, please chime in at the moment.
This is Lamont. I was just going to say the beautiful part about you guys hosting this is that you're innovative in spirit. And so I think that's what this is going to take in terms of getting supplier diversity to that next level, or, looking specifically at this particular category. You don't view things in a sense in a way that was, that status quo. And so, RSN continues to try to find ways to expand the services that you offer. And so I think that's what's going to be needed, because this is a new normal and we don't even know what that normal is. So we can't even say this is a new normal. We have to kind of wait for things to kind of die down. And so I'm sure, with the way that you've approached things before in the past, you're going to continue to do that. How do we meet the needs, those future needs even, and let's take a step ahead so that you're creating a differentiator amongst your competitors because of that innovative spirit. So just kudos to you guys, and really I look forward to seeing what it's going to lead to in terms of new innovation.
Well, I appreciate that. I thank you for the comment, and we will work hard to make sure that you find out what we're doing is right. Any other closing comments from anybody?
No, just to build on that, I really think it's part of a transformation program that's coming forward, less of a program per se on supply diversity, but it's just giving new options. And as part of that, there are many other ways to create business value, right? From some companies, for example, they try to promote business with startups. So that's one segment. Then here we have a supplier diversity. Others will use completely other criteria. So, and I think more it belongs to a transformation program that creates value. I think that's what it's all about. The other side also, supply diversity brings a lot is trust, especially when you're in business that needs and requires a lot of extra steps. Certainly you can get trust out of this community, and I think that's an asset that companies should build on.
Thank you. Let me close this out by saying how much we appreciate our esteemed panelists from participating today. This was, really important information, and I hope everybody got something out of it. As I said at the very beginning, we have recorded this, and we'll be sending a link to the webinar to not only those people who were on the call, but everybody who had originally signed up. And we understand that in these kind of crazy times, not everybody necessarily could have gotten on the call even when they planned on it. So I thank everybody for attending, the speakers as well as the attendees, and stay tuned. We'll be doing these kinds of things in the future. Again, thanks a lot and appreciate it. Good night. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.